Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm Erica Lukes. This is Expanding Frontiers here on Friday, and I want to thank all of my friends from all over the world for being here most every Friday night, for supporting the show, and for supporting the work with Expanding Frontiers Research. You can go to expandingfrontiersresearch.org to sign up for the newsletter and look at some of the groundbreaking work that we are doing, specifically my colleague Jack Brewer. We are really pushing boundaries, getting good information, and putting things out to the public that need to be understood. And hopefully, people that are hiding in the shadows or out there on TV shows, grifting in the world of ufology, can be exposed for what they are, and we can move forward in a more productive way. So anyway, I want to also say thank you to my Patreons for supporting this show. Right now, I've got wonderful Patreons who are keeping the show covered. And I want to thank Mark and Jay, Dave, Hoska, Ed, Andrew, and Mario, who, of course, is here every Friday. But he just had surgery, so we'll see if he pops in later. I want to give a shout out to Peter, who is always in chat and promoting my show on social media. So thank you. This is a community effort, and it's totally rad. And hey, guys, everybody there in chat, thanks for being here. I'm going to add tonight, of course, Jack Brewer, my partner in crime. And then we have, thanks to Jack, we are going to have a great discussion with John Gulyas, and he is somebody that I've been kind of geeking out on. I've been listening to The Saucer Life, his wonderful podcast that covers a lot of different topics with the UFO world and some of the characters, some of the ideas that are floated around. It is really, really cool. So I definitely, if you haven't heard it, you need to check it out and listen to it. You will learn a lot. And so both of you, thank you for being here this evening.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I wanted to say that I have a couple books that I've been posting on Twitter really quick. I've got my pile of stuff over here. A Culture of Conspiracy,
Oh,
and
yeah.
then Enemies Within. And both of these books are wonderful books that I would recommend reading. Enemies Within was written by Robert Allen Goldberg, who actually is or was a professor at the University of Utah. And I had the chance to go to coffee with him a few years ago. And this is when I was like a true believer in all of this. And I remember the conversation that we had. It was just like, what? You're saying this about Stanton Friedman? You're saying this about, so and so? And I just didn't want to believe these specific things then. But as I've gone through my own journey in this subject, I now know, he was really, really onto something. And that's somebody who has kind of looked at this from the outside in, instead of being so involved with things. So I appreciate that. But the next book on my list that I'm super stoked I'm getting in the mail on Monday, not before the show, which kind of bums me out, is your book, Aaron.
Yes.
And so tell us a little bit about this. You wrote it in 2021.
Yes, and this is really embarrassing. I can never remember the name of it, which is
Conspiracy and Triumph.
Conspiracy and Triumph. That's it. They changed the name very close to the time of publication, so I always get confused. But yeah, Conspiracy and Triumph. And it basically takes a look at conspiracy theories with happy endings. So, in general, the sort of stereotypical conspiracy narrative usually ends with right-thinking patriots being rounded up and put into FEMA camps, right? It's bad news all the way down. The New World Order is coming. It is inevitable. The bad guys are in control. And I thought I would look at some conspiracy narratives that sort of flip that a little bit, that say, look, things are bad. Things look really bad. But within those organizations, those institutions that are oppressing us, that are turning the Amtrak repair facilities into death camps, who are doing all that inside those organizations, there are good people. There are the white hats who are going to take control. And when they take control, we need to be ready in order to support them as they bring forward this new age of peace and prosperity. So in sort of exploring that idea, I looked at three things in particular. The first was the Nasara hoax that was Still going in some circles, but really huge. About a decade ago, about an incoming financial transformation that is going to erase all of our debt, and everything's going to be wonderful. And then also QAnon, which when I started working on this was just this weird little thing off in the corner of the internet that wasn't getting a lot of attention. And by the time I finished the book, it was, I cannot believe I agreed to write about this, because this is just so huge and it never ended, and it just churned and churned and churned. And then the other one I talked about in that book was the notion of UFO disclosure. And this idea that not only are aliens real, but the technology that has been hoarded by the evil government will soon be available to all of us, and we will live forever, and not get cancer, and not die, and good things will happen every day. So that's basically what that book
Well, I'm
is.
so excited to read it because, as I've kind of gone down my rabbit hole and Jack has as well. I mean, it's like you see these things and you see people who are, I mean, open-minded. They're looking for a community. They think they've seen something or they find the subject very interesting, whether it's the paranormal or the UFO world. And then they get into these groups of people, much like we see on the internet, where you've got these echo chambers and you're hearing things, and you've got people who are maybe mentally unstable or grifters or deliberately put in these situations to misguide people. And it is like trying to deprogram somebody from a cult. And we've, seen, like, over and over again on the news for a few years now, the fact that people are taking their families out and murdering them because they believe the world is coming to an end, because they believe in the Q drops, because they believe in all of this stuff that is really, really damaging. And so I'm glad to see that this is building traction and people are understanding the damage that this does to families and individuals.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and I don't know if we've seen it as much with the UFO stuff as we have with QAnon and Nasara. Those two things, especially, um, because there's such a sense of imminence to them. Like any day now, this is going to happen, and so you've got the true believers have a sense of urgency, and so they're evangelizing hard, right? They are trying to get their loved ones into the flock, and meanwhile the loved ones are like, Dad, you've lost it. This is not good. Why are you buying these things or sending this person money or running up debt? Because any day now they're going to wipe out all your debt, so it doesn't matter what I put on my credit card because it'll all go away. And relationships get ruined over this. And I think Erica, you made a really good point that people are looking for community, and they're looking for community in places that are designed to keep people in this fold and separated. And there's definitely some cult like things to it. I mean, just tweet the wrong thing with the UFO Twitter hashtag, and you see the swarm descend. And what's funny, not funny, it's horrible, but kind of funny, is when some of the prominent people on UFO Twitter talk about how, this once this story comes out, then my mother-in-law is going to believe me, and finally, people will stop making fun of us. And there's this sense of wanting it to be true because they think it's a good thing, but also wanting it to be true so they're finally proven right after being doubted and proven wrong. And it's a little, you have some empathy
Right.
for some of the people who get caught up in these things.
And yeah, and absolutely. And I think that's what for me has been so troubling, as I've spoken at different UFO conferences and had different people on my show. It's like there are really genuinely lovely people. If there weren't, I wouldn't be here. Like
Mhm.
trying to reach out to people that I think need to have the information so they're making good decisions. And, like I use this story a lot on my show, but when I see, early morning, everybody's getting up and they're going to be hypnotized by a woman who is going to tell them that they are the saviors of the universe and they are special, and they're getting, messages from the tall whites and, all of these things. And you just think, and you see these really wonderful people who just want to have a safe place being manipulated and abused, really. And so it is one of the tragedies of the UFO community. And it's too bad that more people aren't standing up to say, no, we're not going to support these conferences, and we won't be a party to this kind of stuff. And with the new drop that we've had, the latest whistleblower, that came out on the debrief site, thanks to Leslie Keene and Ralph Blumenthal. Now you've got yet another whistleblower, and like you're mentioning, it's like, this time it's it. And here's a guy with military credentials, and then you look at his story, and there's nothing. There's nothing. It's like, well, I saw some pictures. Well, no, I didn't see pictures. It's like the game of an amateur magician, really.
Yeah, and I just, you always sort of wonder what the end game is here, because you've got to know that like with this story, there's really no there. People told him things. He did not experience the things. He did not see the things. People saw, or people who said this, people supposedly told him things, right? And he seems to have this impeccable record, and people are vouching for him, and that's great. That doesn't make his claims true. And I think that it's telling that this story did debut on the debrief, and not where Keene and Blumenthal had previously been able to put UFO stories, like the New York Times. It's easy to be sort of cynical and say, well, New York Times, showed some discernment in at least in this case. But I think it's I don't know. There's less to this story than a lot of the stories, and that's pretty amazing, frankly. After the last few years we've had, that this is getting so much traction when compared to the Tic Tac stuff and the Navy pilots coming forward. It's like that was actually, I think, a little more compelling than this, and yet we're having like investigations, right, based on this, because there are UFO friendly people in the halls of power, which is enough to make you a little worried sometimes.
That makes me very worried, actually. You're being very, very delicate and reserved. And
Yeah, I am. Very, yeah.
It just happens again and again and again. And people that are excited about the latest story might say to me, oh, not to this extent. I mean, look at that. And all I can think is they just must not have the knowledge of history and the awareness of history that people like Aaron have, who literally study it, write competent books about it with receipts. And to my knowledge, there has yet to be a time in history where, like in the late 1950s, 1960s, NICAP just had a board of high intelligence officers proclaiming some of the most sensational statements you could dream up. They got congressional hearings. It actually ended up being the demise of the organization to get those hearings. And it's just never stopped. I mean, every decade there's 1, 2, 3 people, all of them have an entourage with several people. And it's kind of interesting too that like in the latest Mr. Grush, I don't even like to call it a whistleblower because it's not. It's not a whistleblower. The story is, you could find this material in paperback.
Yep.
Like it's on television, it's on podcasts, it's already been said. And it's kind of interesting that it's even framed as being new and unique. And in that, and I think that this is one of the things like that Aaron was discussing that he's covered in his latest book. There's a certain thread in this stuff that the people like to think they are on the inside and have some inside track, and they're getting informed. And the only place you get this information is through shady private messages on social media or message board forums or email chains with the right people in the know. And yeah, ultimately are like forsaking family and friends, losing jobs to spend more time on the computer with this world-changing mystery that they're tracking down. And it's just happened to people again and again and again.
It does. And I mean, I don't know if well, you guys actually probably do remember, but back in 1997 with the 50th anniversary of Roswell, there was there was going to be this report. The Air Force was finally looking into it. They'd been pressured by, what was his name, Schiff, I think Congressman Schiff out of Arizona, or sorry, New Mexico, and there was going to be something. And then the report comes out, and it's, well, it's a weather balloon, or it's a, and the thing is, that doesn't make it less of an interesting case that something fell out of the sky and people were fascinated and not sure what it was because it wasn't their, compartment of things to be paying attention to this particular thing. But there weren't bodies, there weren't, bits of wreckage. Art's parts were never really fully identified as anything strange or anything like that. And it sort of followed on the heels of the alien autopsy tape. Yeah, Steve Schiff. Followed on the heels of the alien autopsy thing. And there was just, the 90s were this time when it felt like around the corner there was going to be something solid. And there never was. And then you had the Day After Roswell book, another, whistleblower thing that Roswell was the source of all the modern technology we enjoy today, despite the fact that we can trace all of those modern technologies back very easily through paper trails, right? We know where fiberglass came from, but it was, everybody was sort of hyped up enough that you get, your Stephen Greer's on the scene at that point, and they never leave. And it's just the same thing over and over.
And he's still talking about his biceps. I mean, it's just never disclosure, my beautiful biceps. It's and it really, to me, it's interesting to see how these guys, as much as they claim they dislike each other, it's like, oh, one's doing a press conference, well, here's another one, and here they're, and then you go back to, God, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, there are pictures of Stephen Greer and Robert Bigelow and Linda Moulton Howe and all of these people. And it's just like, what a cozy little group of people there that have been promoting disinformation. So it's quite curious.
There's certainly a cottage industry.
Mm-hmm.
There are people that profit and become more in demand for speaking engagements, writing articles, things like that, that it's good for their business for any story to get high profile. It's complex, though. There's all these different types of people involved in the whole machination. And that's one of the things that makes it difficult to diagram. And I think that people like Aaron do a great job of diagramming it in his work. And you simply cannot lay out a systematic presentation of facts without quality verifiable evidence. And so all these efforts to rationalize and say, well, he wouldn't this if he didn't that, and all of these compromises that are just incredible mental gymnastics to try to get around it's just a story are I don't I mean I get close to being speechless about what do we even say about it other than come see us when you have something other than a witness testimony.
Right. Right. Or even worse, come back when you've got an actual witness who's willing to testify instead of saying so and so told me, or so and so told me they saw something written down somewhere. That's you wouldn't that's not admissible, right? Yeah, unprecedented financial opportunity. Well, why would anybody lie about this? Well, look how much money these conferences bring in.
Right.
I mean, it's and you know, books publishing isn't huge money, but there's money there. There's all sorts of ways to make money on these things. And you know, you get a show on the History Channel. If you're in with the right people, there
Right.
are a lot of avenues to generate income, and the right sort of people seem to be hovering in the background of a lot of these different people who come forward. You know, there's names out there who promote these things. You know, George Knapp is always somewhere on the scene with some of these folks, and you know, that's everybody's got to make a buck, right? So, you know, that's great, but you just want that little disclaimer at the bottom that says, like, for novelty purposes only,
Right.
right? You just there's people who don't realize this is an entertainment business, who think it's real, and that's dangerous because it's these things have a way of working towards eroding trust in institutions, and even in concepts like science and evidence-based reasoning, because you can't trust that. You can't trust the scientists because the scientists are part of the establishment. Well, where are you getting your information? A different part of the establishment who's telling the truth, right? So there's just the standards of critical thinking just kind of break down, and that has consequences beyond the flying saucer world.
And you can't really have that discussion without it bleeding into that's very much in the interests of foreign adversaries.
Yeah. You know, you've got information out there that might have nothing to do with UFOs, but somebody somewhere might pick up on that little bit of information and say, oh, we didn't know they had something that did that. That's interesting. They're looking at this film and saying, okay, we know about that thing, but we didn't know it could do it like that. Okay, so great. We've got that little piece of data, and
and their interest in deteriorating the democratic process, the medical process, the whole critical thinking apparatus, really.
There's I don't want to go so far as to say there is a sort of weaponized attempt at dumbing down the public, but golly, it sort of seems like it sometimes, doesn't it?
Chance if there's not,
you know, exactly. And we know that social media, Facebook, for example, you know, when you react to something, it gives you more of that,
Right.
and it reacts more strongly to things that you're angry about. Why do you think they added the angry emoji as a response?
Right.
So they know what riles you up. And you'll have people going into the comments of posts they don't like saying, why is this showing up on my timeline? I don't agree with this. It's like, because you did that. Because that's what you did. And so it brings more eyeballs to the platform, which is ad revenue. But this this just feels like we're watching something just go wrong. Like we're going to look back at the last 5, 6, 7 years and say, this is when we started getting kind of stupid, just, in, statistically significant numbers. And I'm not saying UFOs are the sole reason, but they're a tool that helps make that more possible.
Absolutely. And that's something that I've been, kind of sounding the alarm on for a long time. It's just like, oh my gosh, this is such a great community to get in and manipulate if you've got a goal. And then you see that like with the New Age and wellness community, with Russian propaganda, with all of these, different communities that are being infiltrated, and certain messages are being put forward to the public that are creating, especially here in America, well, in other countries as well, but creating that distrust of our institutions, as you mentioned, and creating distrust within our own social unit. And that is really, it's alarming, and we should start to understand that when we're going on social media, maybe don't get into every group.
Yeah.
That is, hey, we've got this group on UFOs, come join. Make sure you don't do that. You don't get in there and give all your personal information out, because you just don't know what is going to happen and who's behind the scenes, really. I mean, it's alarming.
I can imagine it. I can see it being a very useful pool of recruits for somebody who's looking to mobilize a group of people who don't trust the government and are willing to take action about that. Because, boy, if they're lying about the flying saucers, what else are they lying about?
Right.
So yeah, absolutely. It's not a new thing, but I think social media makes it so quick and so fast and so easy to just slip into horrible places. And it's probably my age. I'm like, the internet was fine before Facebook and Twitter, but no, it wasn't. There's some very horrible message boards out there in the 10, 15, 20 years ago. But I think the social media algorithms feed you what they want to feed you. You get content pushed at you rather than seeking it out.
Right.
And who's doing the pushing is an important question.
Absolutely. And that's why I never hashtag UFO Twitter. Thank you. No, not interested. I don't know what's going on with that group, but I have no desire to get in the middle of that, because the majority of the people, or whatever they are definitely in the game of bullying and creating, their own little fiefdoms. So it's unfortunate.
It is, and just lots of targeting of anybody they deem to be a threat to them, or that challenges their point of view. It's very much, I don't know. I've got this sort of notion that things really started to go downhill within the sort of paranormal and conspiratorial spheres when, in order to get into it, you no longer had to read books, but you could just watch a YouTube video and feel like you knew everything. And it used to be, especially with conspiracy stuff, you had to read some pretty difficult, dense material to feel like you had a handle on what the truth was. And you had to employ some critical thinking with significant gaps in it sometimes, but you had to put some effort and some thought into it. And I think social media makes it easy to get a very surface level sort of education in things, but make it feel like you have these secrets and that you're an insider, because he's only talking to you and 16,000 of his closest followers, which is, you're one of the true believers. So it's different now. And the instant communication and all these things just make it more dangerous, more dangerous, and more of a threat to critical thinking, and also less fun.
Right.
It's not as fun as it used to be.
Absolutely. And I remember when I first picked up my book UFO book in like grade school, and it was just like, this is so cool, and I just want to explore and learn about the paranormal and just do things that were fun and, you know, empowering or maybe silly, whatever. A little embarrassing now that I look back at it, but you know, it was still, it was something that was in its own way empowering. And now, you know, again, like I mentioned, getting into these social media groups and then having people, you know, you're looking for an answer to a specific sighting. I saw this or had this experience. Please tell me what it is. And then people that are clearly not qualified are giving people information to take their own personal power away, I believe. And I think we all have to come back to a place where it's like, okay, we don't need, you know, great, I've had an experience. Write it down in a journal. Keep it to yourself. Find your own meaning for it. Don't look to these communities that are full of people we don't know, you know, that are hiding behind anonymous names and promoting sources that can't be verified. We just can't do that anymore.
Yeah, it's it I remember just sort of like you said, I remember being young and reading Omni magazine and thinking that, you know, I was going to find out the truth from reading Omni magazine, which is the sort of thing you think when you're, you know, 15. But at least I was reading, and I didn't have a UFO group I belonged to. I was just learning this stuff on my own. And then you find the internet and you talk to people, but it was a small group. And now it's big and it's wide open, and it's and some of these people do not have everyone's best interests at heart, which is another old story in the UFO field. But like everything in our day and age, it seems to be just amplified.
Right now, I remember, like, we all grew up in the era of the X-Files.
Yeah.
You know, and that was just, or ET, and, you know, I mean, it was just, so those things were very exciting, and the X-Files was really sexy. You know, it's like, oh, here we are, and we're exploring things, and there's this dynamic couple, and they're out there, you know, studying cattle mutilations and all of this stuff. And so it was very sexy and alluring for a lot of people. And then you get into MUFON or different organizations, and it's like, okay, it's really not so sexy anymore, literally.
No, not at all.
For multiple reasons.
Well, you know, I can kind of empathize with a group comes on the scene that's at least perceived to be new, you know, never mind that half of them have been around for decades spreading one story or another, but they're at least perceived to be the new guys that are going to take this in hand and get it straightened out and quit fooling around. And I can kind of understand that, you know, the social media being what it is, guys want their blogs to be read. They want their shows to be important. And if they're given preferential treatment for covering these things in certain ways and all, it's not hard to see how that can snowball. And it's not difficult to understand that the content creators might even have somewhat of a feeling like, well, if you haven't come up with something in 75 years, how important could it be for me to know what happened before now? This seems like these guys know what they're doing, and I don't really care what happened before. And the problem with that is, while you won't find a answer to the mysteries, all the mysteries of the universe by going back over time, you will find things like the topic is riddled with people with political agendas using the UFO topic to gain traction. Or you will find that even as recently as QAnon, recently in the grand scheme, their following was targeted for a cryptocurrency scam. And you will find these things over time that happen again and again, while these innocent, in some cases, people, as Erica described, that are just wanting to study a mystery, maybe wanting to have fun, make some friends, get increasingly pulled into these communities that they incorrectly think you only find this stuff out from this Discord or this group of direct messages and things. And I've talked with Aaron offline about this before, exchanged messages about it, that somehow people get this idea that it's this secret knowledge when it's actually, I mean, he literally writes books about it. And it's the stuff that sociologists and psychologists study and explain how this idea arose and how it evolved, and then it showed up again over in this political movement, and then it was adopted and adapted and taken for this political movement. And those are the things we miss if we just blow off everything that was written before and just jump on a bandwagon with emotional enthusiasm.
Yeah, it's I mean, and I'm a historian, so of course I'm going to be on the history is important, sort of side of things. But just from a practical level, it might not feel like history to some of us who are of a certain age. But how many stories has someone like Linda Moulton Howe broken since the mid 1980s that either just go nowhere or have their roots in somebody specifically wanting her to talk about a certain story? But still, just this perennial, award-winning journalist Linda Moulton Howe is here on Dreamland to tell us about blah blah blah. It's like, and she's talking to some guy in a field who saw something, and it just goes over and over and over again. And I do sympathize with people who are new and enthusiastic, and nobody wants to be told by some middle-aged guy that this happened back in '87 and nobody wants to hear that. But sometimes you need to say, this is a lot, and there's ways to do it. There's ways to sort of say, this is really interesting and has a lot of parallels to when this happened back in 1987. So that would be a really good thing to look at and see if there are any interesting connections, and sort of lead people to finding for themselves that, oh my gosh, this this Bigelow guy or this John Alexander guy, his names sort of show up all over the place with this weird stuff. And MUFON. Oh, MUFON's an interesting organization. What happened to all those hypnosis files? And it's you sort of get into these things, and it's sort of, it doesn't give you answers, but it helps you understand why things are the way they are now. And if you're new and you're interested in what's going on now, you should learn how we got there. And history is not predictive. It can't tell the future. This whistleblower Grush might be the real deal. He might come up with the goods. I mean, weirder things have happened. I mean, like maybe one or two weirder things, but it's but you can't ignore what's come before. Right. And but it's tempting to, because it's not exciting. It's not fresh. It's not new. It's not secret. And it's not exclusive knowledge that only the initiates know. It's stuff that's in books for everyone. So I sympathize, but no, it's like eating your vegetables. You have to do it. You have to sort of have a cursory knowledge of what's come before. And the problem is so much of the stuff in the past is just bad and makes ufology look bad. There's there's so many shady people who have done shady things. And, that doesn't necessarily mean that the person on the screen right now in front of you on whatever you're watching is one of those shady people. But you've got to allow for that possibility that they are, at best, being dishonest for financial gain, at worst, a deeply, deeply reprehensible person on whatever physical or moral or spiritual level you want to imagine. It's a cesspool, but cesspools can be interesting. That metaphor is not really going where I want it to go, but it's a cesspool, but with like bright shiny lights around it to make you think it's an ice rink or something. And once you get into it, you realize, oh, this is horrible. This is full of slimy people, and some of us are fascinated by the slimy people, and stick around.
Clearly, Jack, we kind of have that problem, don't we?
Yeah. I think too, to add to Aaron's insights, there is if we're emotionally grabbed, and I'll put it like it is different today. I mean, we had the pandemic that really changed in-person events, and then the internet was really flourishing anyway before the pandemic, and it's just a different genre today, a different subculture, where we used to have to attend conferences and read magazines and read books, and you really wouldn't even get the next update maybe for weeks or months, and you had to, as Aaron was saying, read that or go seek it out, write real letters, and so I'll use the analogy of, we used to like to have to go to the conferences, and you kind of get indoctrinated. You can like get this emotional rush and this adrenaline, and like, man, that stuff is real when you're around people for 3 days or so, that it's real. Mm-hmm. And so one of the problems then with going to the historian or the sociologist that knows the Nazi implications and significance from the 40s forward, and the different political groups that hijacked it, and all of these different things that have happened, is that then that historian talks about it objectively, maybe while eating a Reuben sandwich. And now, and I'm out of time. I got to go teach some classes, where the community member, the enthusiast, wants to like grab them by the lapels and go, how can you be aware of this and not doing anything? We've got to learn more. We've got to learn more. And that person that's just doing objective research understands it just keeps cycling, and that there's nothing to do. There's no one to go inform. There's no congressman to make sure knows about something. There's just people doing what people do, and tries to kind of observe this and gain some insights, and it just keeps going on and on.
It does. And I think that community aspect, that idea of going to those conferences or gathering in online spaces now, because some of those things have changed a lot. You are around people who think and feel like you do, and there's not some grumpy historian finishing his lunch saying, "Oh yeah, every 9 months one of these guys comes out with this. I gotta go." But there's you get in deep enough to UFOs or anything else like this, NESARA, QAnon, the movement, the belief, the thing, it can never fail. UFOs can never fail. We can only fail ufology by not believing hard enough or working hard enough for the truth. Because the prophets have come and been cast out. Look how you treated poor Lou. Look how you're treating poor Grush or whatever. Why would any more whistleblowers come forward when they are just disrespected? You say you are interested in UFOs, but you're really not, because if you were, you would respect these brave patriots
Right.
who are doing what nobody else is brave enough to do.
Right.
And
Yep.
it's, you know, you have failed ufology through your critiques.
And you got to love the Patriot, throwing that Patriot out. Yeah, that's a good one. Little dog whistle there.
Yep.
But it is, yeah, that is really interesting, that especially with Elizondo, somebody who is, on his Twitter, feed, right at the top of it, it's, I won't bully people, I won't do A, B, C, and D. And it's like, no, you just meet behind the scenes with other people and have them do your dirty work for you.
Right.
I think that's happened to all of us, and that is unfortunate that people that are getting caught up in that don't realize, hey, why should I be used as somebody to go out and bully other people online? It's ridiculous. And if you don't have tangible evidence, those are the types of things you resort to, because
Yeah.
you're either, lying about your credentials, you're exaggerating your credentials, you don't have anything to go on to begin with as far as your UFO claims to fame,
Mhm.
and there's some sort of grift or other motivation involved, and it's really crazy to see all of this happen again and again.
It really is. And the idea that, I don't know, I'm not sure how I want to say this, but the idea that you are getting all sort of ginned up to attack and be really vicious and nasty to people, and online, which is still awful, but these people would probably, hopefully, never be too awful in real life. But you're not even getting upset about politics. You're getting upset about flying saucer stories. It's but related to some of the things that we've been talking about, you're developing an audience whose emotions you can manipulate and who you can encourage to act in a way you want them to act. And if it can be done with UFOs, you can move that to questions about questioning public health policy, or election results, or any number of things you want to point this group at and manipulate them into doing certain things. I tell my students that the Committee on Public Information during World War I, that sort of invented modern wartime propaganda, a lot of those guys came from the advertising industry and went back into the advertising industry and revolutionized advertising in the 1920s, because if you can sell a war, selling a washing machine is really easy. So there's like a long history of techniques to engage with and manipulate populations. And at this point, we've got it down to such a precise thing. You can just aim these little spear points of venom at whatever targets you think are necessary. I'm not saying that's sort of was the plan from the beginning. I think it's a potentially useful side effect for some groups.
Right. And I think, given your, excuse me, Jack, I didn't mean to
Go
interrupt
right
you,
ahead.
but Aaron, given, your background as an historian, somebody who specializes in American history, modern American history, and the military, United States military, your comments are very relevant, and the studies that you've done over the years are important for my listeners and other people to really grasp and understand, because there is something bigger than just a UFO grift. There is something underneath, behind the scenes, that is going on, that I feel is important, and people need to grasp that. So thank you.
Yeah. It's I try. I try to talk about it in a slightly entertaining way, but sometimes it's worrying. Sometimes I'm more worried than I used to be about this topic, and I think one of the things I think I saw in the comments somebody talking about some crossover between QAnon and the UFO field. One of the things when I was writing that last book is was looking at a lot of Michael Sala's stuff, and Michael Sala sort of went all in on QAnon being an element of UFO disclosure. That this was going to be one of the avenues through which, the message would get out. Now, whether he believed that or whether he glommed onto something that was rapidly growing in popularity, I don't know. But he I can't remember exactly, but he had some sort of thing where he was looking at some numbers in some Q drops and found that through some sort of calculation, they corresponded to the ISBN numbers of some of his books. So clearly this is a message from the, Q clearance patriot that, Michael Sala is on the right track, which is just, when you see these intersections, it's kind of surprising sometimes, but often very just disheartening. That it's just sad to see. Just, I'm being nostalgic here, but quaint old flying saucer stuff get mixed up with awfulness. But then you look at people like William Dudley Pelley, who were involved in the early UFO days, and you look at people like George Hunt Williamson, who hung out with Pelley, who had was put in prison during World War II for sedition, and it's very sort of cozy with the German-American Bund during the 1930s with his Silver Shirts organization. You look at somebody like Ernst Zundel using UFOs and supposed Nazi connections to UFOs to basically add to his write this to find out about the Nazi UFOs, and boom, you're on my neo-Nazi Holocaust denial, mailing list back in the 70s and into the 80s, and into today with who's the guy? There's a guy. Clark McClelland, who is loony. I mean, just loony. But these stories about the aliens and NASA knowing all about
forgiven for a story of an alien in a space shuttle cargo.
Yeah, the alien in the space shuttle cargo. But then you listen to his interviews, and boy, it's like he really, really talks admiringly about all those Germans who worked at NASA back in the day. And it's amazing what group of international financial people won't allow his book to be published. It's like they're not even dog whistles. It's just it's and yeah. there's a lot of that out there, but it's distressing that those political elements have been part of the flying saucer scene since very early on. And that's not to say that the people running NICAP and APRO and MUFON and your local flying saucer club number 72 down the street were political extremists of any stripe. But that was an element that was in it, and it was an element that could be manipulated.
Right, absolutely. And that's the thing that I find so interesting. I mean, you look at some of the harassment that people in the UFO community received in the 70s when they were getting, they were being delivered tapes of Nazi speeches, marches, and that was, I know that I'm trying to remember the publication where the woman, oh my gosh, I'm having a complete mind meld right now, but a great ufologist from over in the United Kingdom.
Jenny Randles?
Yes, Jenny Randles, where she experienced some of that harassment and spoke about it. And then you look at, Schamstadt, and you look at I've been collecting flyers, and I'm just going to throw this out there. If anybody has any material from that Ernst Zundel group, please let me have that, because I've been looking into it, and I find it really, again, disturbing, and why people in the UFO community at the time chose to just walk away from it and not shine a light on it is like completely crazy to me, because this is, to me, this absolutely should have been, rooted out and called out from the beginning.
That is That is a really good question, and I've wondered that too. And the only thing I can sort of think of is that the big names and the big organizations um, didn't see anybody below their level as really worth paying attention to.
Hmm.
And especially in that period when you had competition between NICAP and APRO, and then APRO and MUFON, when you had that competition between organizations, when you had the big names competing for speaking gigs, and especially back then, book sales, when UFO books were actually on the little paperback spinner rack at the supermarket and not just on that one shelf at Barnes and Noble that just has 5 copies of Behold a Pale Horse. It was people like Zundel and some of those others. They were, who cares? What they've got, like a little ad in the Weekly World News. It's not a big deal. I would honestly be surprised if anybody that, up to a certain point, I think there was just so much ignorance of that stuff going on, because the people at the sort of top tier were busy managing their careers as UFO personalities, and doing research, to be fair, but policing the field, I don't think was on their radar, which is really, really unfortunate, I think.
It is unfortunate, because I think in any profession, when you want standards and I mean, those are things that have to be accomplished. Those are things when people are being harassed, when people are being threatened or intimidated. Those are things that have to be called out in order to make a subject or a profession more credible. And that is, I think, one of the biggest failings, the biggest failing of the UFO community over the decades, is they haven't had these standards. And that says a lot. And unfortunately now, even though there could be something tangible to the subject now because of the latest crap that we've seen going on with the latest whistleblower, I mean, this subject will be this will be damaged for a long, long time. So
Lots of conflicts of interest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think we should not pass the opportunity to point out it was Ernst Zundel and Samizdat in Montreal that the NICAP president at the time, Jack Acuff, sold the NICAP mailing list twice.
Yeah, once might be an oversight, but twice, no, we would just.
I
Yeah.
mean, yeah. Well, I mean, and of course, I've been, like I've said, I've been collecting, stuff, and I just
Oh,
find
yeah.
this, the Samstadt. I mean, but hello, my little tall white Nordic being. We love you. You are the saviors of the universe. It's like, at what point did we not get a clue? It's just awkward, and it's just bad form, actually.
It is, and yeah, I think, I'm not sure. Does ufology have to end for the study of the UFO subject to go forward? Or ufology as an organized concept, is there anything really left that, I don't know? It all seems to be a series of media grifts and money grabs, and you talk about, well, this scientist or that scientist is involved in this effort, and then those guys end up on the same speaking circuit as the weirdos, and the weirdos, and the frauds. And I think one of the biggest mistakes ufology sort of information organizers and promoters do is, was it the big disclosure hearing that was a few years ago, or one of those events at the National Press Club or whatever? They had solid retired military witnesses who had interesting things to say sitting next to people who had no credibility whatsoever. And credibility sort of flows one way, right? You're not going to say, well, this guy makes no sense and has no evidence, but this guy makes sense. This guy does have something more credible to say. So I'm going to make the less credible person, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I don't think it does that. I think it just makes both people look like they lack credibility. And you get such a mixed bag of the different strands and genres in ufology sort of mixing together. And it to a public that is unexposed to the subject, who might be tuning in or trying to find stuff out, it all just looks sort of shady and fraudulent. And I don't know how we get out of that. I don't know. I don't know how. I don't know if ufology as a field can do that, because it's not actually a field. It's just what people call a field to make themselves feel like they're in a field. But
it's entertainment genre. Yeah.
It's I don't know where it goes from here. It'll go somewhere. It always has. But I think it fragments. I think the days of the big organizations are over. MUFON is, I don't know. Right. I get the emails for their international symposium this summer, and I'm looking at this list of speakers, and it's like, I know who a couple of these people are. I've never heard of most of them. And when I look into them, it's like, oh, this is, again, a really mixed bag of things.
Yeah.
It's strange stuff. And so I think it is going to be, I think it is going to be more of an entertainment sort of genre of paranormal ishness that is run along those lines, and then small groups of serious researchers sort of doing their thing very quietly and hopefully doing it well.
Yeah, that would be good. Absolutely. I agree with that. And it is interesting now to see, like Enigma Labs and some of these, people or organizations coming out of the woodwork who are remaining anonymous. And it's like they're trying to buy data and have the rights to it. And so I don't know, there's some really curious things going on with data mining. And I'm not quite sure what that's about, but I guess we should ask Bigelow. He wouldn't return, a reply. But, so it's the whole thing is fascinating, and it does get very dark sometimes, and that is unfortunate, but it is where we are, and it needs to be talked about. So,
yeah.
As Erica aptly pointed out, you have some expertise in American military, and I can understand how people, aren't necessarily interested in the intelligence agencies and the military aspect of the weird, UFOs and paranormal. For me, I just happened to get interested in it because as I was becoming a little more cynical about these never-ending stories, personal experiences, it seemed like something I could sink my teeth into about various projects that there are FOIA documents and things like that. And then as I was researching and learning about NICAP, I was honestly rather appalled at some of the things that intelligence officers were demanding of the federal government. That just seems so strange to me. For instance, I remember a congressman really read Kehoe, the Riot Act, at one point, because Kehoe proposed that NICAP representatives be allowed to question certain intelligence agency representatives in a public setting, yet not disclose where these NICAP representatives were even getting their information from, and expecting answers. And in more current times, I can understand that people don't really see this as a intelligence issue or a counterintelligence issue, espionage, things like that. Yet it nonetheless really strikes me how advantageous it might be to adversaries to have the American public literally harassing intelligence agencies to disclose classified information and files and answer questions off the cuff in press conferences. Would you comment on that somehow? How this, it's like UFO blinders that don't even consider, what if there's not a UFO in this file?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's interesting that they're yeah, UFO blinders. We are entitled to know everything about everything if we think there might be aliens at the bottom of it. And there's lots of technology out there that should not be talked about. And when people whose job it is to protect that technology from being known about push back or are coy or sort of dissemble, it's taken as proof that that the government can't be trusted, and you can't trust the intelligence community. And you can point to all sorts of reasons why no, we should not trust the intelligence community, that it might not have the best interests of the citizenry at heart if the citizenry's interests are in opposition to national security goals, right? So yeah, there's lots of reasons to insist upon careful oversight of the intelligence community. That does not mean that 67890XV4 on Twitter has a right to know what the CIA knows about something or what the NSA has intercepted at a particular time.
And are literally, excuse me, I'll just interject quickly, please, are literally encouraging people with security clearances to leak information.
That is, and that's gone back a while. There was an effort, I think it was in one of Greer's things was we need to actively lobby Congress to pass laws that protect people who violate security oaths for telling us information about UFOs. And this is, if you don't want to be bound by a security oath, don't go into a job that requires you to be bound by a security oath. And I just have a hard time believing that people who claim they are violating their security oaths by revealing this information are actually doing anything of the sort.
Right. Well, there are penalties for that.
Yeah.
It would be, I mean, we saw that the fellow who was 19, 20, 21, who was working in gathering intelligence and putting it on different chat rooms.
Yep.
Who is now, facing federal charges. I mean, yes, there are consequences for that. So,
and got a former president indicted.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, if they can do that, they can get any of us, right? But it's one of those things where it's become almost a trope in UFO world that, well, if he is telling the truth, then wouldn't they prosecute him for revealing this information? And the response is always, well, no, because if they did that, then we would know he was telling the truth. So they can't prosecute him for leaking this information because that'll be the big reveal. And it's like, but if it was really that situation, man, people have car accidents all the time, right?
And why doesn't he leak something that matters? Yeah.
And then there's, of course, the possibility or probability in some cases that whatever is being supposedly leaked is exactly what somebody in that community once out there for whatever reason, whether to identify people who might spread that information or to just put out misinformation to various parties.
You know,
Yeah.
and I've always wondered, I've always kind of questioned that with the NICAP selling, the selling of the NICAP list. Could that have been a potential motivation? I don't know.
I can imagine a situation where somebody somewhere gets wind of some elements within NICAP who are perhaps extreme to a degree that need to be kept an eye on. We did that a lot with political extremists back in the day. And so you say, hey, sell the list to this guy. And then you start tracking and cross-checking who is on both lists and who seems to be writing for more information or ordering things. And then you're able to sort of observe things that way. I can see that. I can see that being a thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Similarly, I wondered, Erica, if Kehoe, wittingly or otherwise, was just a tool to find out what officers will talk to a third party off the record and give them copies of documents. Like, I can't imagine how the FBI and the CIA and the Air Force Office of Special Intelligence would not have ended up interested in who Kehoe's sources are just to make sure that their security clearances got flagged. I mean, it's really just mind-bending when you look at it from the intelligence community perspective. If you can take off the UFO glasses momentarily and say, okay, just for a minute, whether there's a UFO in this story or not, what if these guys are just working on craft that were Chinese or something, whatever, down satellites, our own materials that they just want to, they're like a clean team that isn't told what it is and are just, they'd want to see how long does it take somebody if one of these goes down to figure out what it was and what it could do. There's just so many questions to these kinds of stories that if you look at it from an intelligence community perspective, it just fascinates me that so much of the public doesn't see this as problematic to the Department of Defense to have so many people clamoring for more information. And then, yes, it gets very complex when we scratch our heads and go, hey, wait a minute. Over here in this instance, the Department of Defense moved the story along.
Yes, I agree. I think those are good questions, and it is always interesting when the DoD is like, "Well, yes, we do have a statement about this. Actually, we have a statement ready to go, and we will have our press conference at this time, and we will say these things." And those things are things that, in some cases, move the story off the front page because, oh, it's, this is what it was, and oh, it's explained now. So it gets things off the front page, and it sets the UFO people on each other and redirects them to, instead of looking intently at this footage that maybe shouldn't have gotten out there, to yelling at each other about whether or not the DoD is lying about something. And you've successfully redirected them, and they go back to being UFO Twitter people.
That is so true. Like, you just think of the fact that Jeremy Corbell's video was even shown in front of anybody that matters. It's like, oh my Lord. I mean, yeah, the whole thing is absolutely insane. But I don't know, where do you think, you were mentioning, Aaron, that you think I mean, you're questioning like what should happen with the UFO field. Like, is it just better? And I've heard this over the years. Is it better if it just implodes and then people just go behind the scenes and do their thing? I mean,
I don't think I don't think that would be a bad thing. I don't think it would set back our knowledge of alien cultures if organized ufology kind of went the way of I was going to say the Flat Earth Society, but they're sort of back, right? Of prohibition or the old temperance movements or something, and just sort of becomes this historical oddity, because I don't think ufology is going to give us the answers about extraterrestrial life. If it's out there, we will either find it or we won't, and it's probably not going to come from somebody who is currently involved in ufology. I just think it's a real search, it's a real question, and I think ufology is ill-equipped to actually give us any answers about extraterrestrial life. What I worry about is what seems to be a growing number of people in official positions who are UFO people, and not people interested in it for the purposes of manipulating, you know, information like, we've had traditionally, but people who are sort of true UFO believers who are like, well, what can I do to move the UFO agenda forward in my position on, in a staff position at the Pentagon, or as a chief of staff for a representative? Oh, me, I can push for hearings about what this whistleblower said. And what is that taking resources away from? And how can that also be used to manipulate things as well? It seems like there's a growing unseriousness about the actual job of governance, and I think let's have a hearing about the UFOs or about how the DoD responds to these UFO claims. I just worry that sometimes that can veer into this sort of, I'm a junior Congress member who has gotten my name in the paper, and people will remember my name when I run for re-election or the Senate, or I want a better committee position or something. So I worry a little bit about weirdo true believers in there. I worry about the fact that maybe the prevalence of true believers in UFO stuff in government is a reflection of society as a whole. Not that I have a problem with hardcore UFO believers. I just have a problem with the growing sense that rational discourse and evidence-based things should not be the source of policy.
right.
Which is concerning. So, should ufology survive? I mean, if it wants to, I guess it can. I won't be sad if it goes away. If MUFON folds, it won't affect my life one bit, and I don't think it'll affect the search for extraterrestrial
Well,
life.
it shouldn't. And I think like the NASA, having what NASA came forward with their panel discussion, talking about it, it's like they were very, in my opinion, very forthright. And the blowback that they received from the quote unquote disclosure community is absolutely shameful. And that right there to me says the disclosure community doesn't really care about the subject. This is there for them to weaponize, as we heard from Corbell and everybody else, to weaponize, and Donald Trump, whatever, weaponize people to have distrust in the government and do things that are going to be not in anybody's best interest. So I think that's unfortunate, and people need to wake up and understand this. If we care about the subject at all, then we will be calling these people out and saying, no, this isn't going to work.
Yeah, I worry about ufology being one of the things that is added to the strand of angry grievances and sort of things we need to fight back about, because it's a topic driven by emotion, and those emotions can be, curiosity and wonder and fascination with the unknown, and those can easily also be manipulated into frustration and anger, and then directed at the people who are keeping the secrets, and much like any other type of conspiracy culture.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, Jack, what are your thoughts on all of this?
Oh, I think you guys are bringing up a number of very valid points. It's so emotion driven that there really isn't anything that a person can do scientifically armed with a iPhone and a laptop computer if they're given a UFO report. Like that's another thing that led me to be more interested in doing FOIA work and public records requests and things like that is, you need people with credentials and access to laboratories and, people with expertise in film analysis and the equipment they need to do the analysis. And it's kind of much ado about nothing to organize everyone and meet over at the bagel shop once a month to talk about the latest UFO reports, which is fine if it's like a book club or something. But in the case of MUFON, if you're calling yourself scientifically studying a topic, there's certain criteria that has to apply by definition for it to be scientific. And I don't see how that applies in virtually any circumstances. And with social media and with the news reporting that has largely become entertainment and political based as well, there is such a lack of critical thinking that some people are sincerely unaware of how biased and irrational they are. And then there's people that are aware that take advantage of those who are biased and irrational. And then there's just a whole gamut of why that is. As we've been discussing, some are interested in furthering political agendas, some are interested in finding people to sow distrust of government, some are looking for people if we can make a common denominator of distrusting authority, well, then we can use that as a bridge to any number of other movements. And sometimes that movement is just getting people's money from their checking account into the person that's doing the manipulating. And I mean, let's face it too, there's a certain percentage of people that just are mentally unwell and are thriving or striving for attention. In fact, I think that, as Aaron pointed out earlier, one of the problems he sees, a milestone where it went off a cliff. It was already, going downhill, but then where the jalopy went over the cliff was with not needing to read anymore to be an expert interviewed on the circuit. Was I think when, as the internet became more prevalent, we were going to making the rounds on what they called message boards that were internet forums, and we would use screen names, and it became less important for anyone to know who we are, and
Right.
what we do, and that's kind of baked into ufology too. It's kind of rude to ask somebody, well, how the hell would you know? What are your credentials?
Well, that's the thing, and I want to ask you, because I was thinking earlier about like above top secret and some of these message boards that, I mean, there's some interesting people that have had a lot to say on those things, and we've heard from different people that there were some interesting connections with the people that own above top secret. So what are your thoughts on message boards like that?
I think message boards are, I mean, if we look back all the way back to Paranet and the BBSs and Usenet and things, there's been this evolution with the anonymity and things like that going with it, and the ability to say pretty much anything being a problem. I think one of the things you saw with boards like Above Top Secret was, instead of a place where people discussed UFO news, increasingly you have places like that making the news. They are the news. Stories are being broken on message boards by anonymous people who've talked to other people, or personalities who don't have another platform come to there to spread their things. I think when John Lear made his comeback back in 2003 or 2004, he, I think, was one of those people. He had his own board there on Above Top Secret, and it always sort of, and this is sort of UFO culture in general. It's kind of like the old Art Bell show in reverse. Art would have guests who have written books and are experts in various fields, and they may be completely bonkers, but they've done a lot of work to put their bonkers ideas out there and to promote themselves, and they're generally professional. And then you'd have the unscreened open lines where people would say anything. The open line callers have become the main event in some ways, and it's from this pool that ufology is getting its stars, or at least its sort of mid-card stars, because you can't keep me out. That's gatekeeping. You can't tell me I'm not an expert. I know what I know, and I know what what I've seen, and I know who I've talked to, and blah blah blah. So it's almost hilarious to talk about an idea like the death of expertise in terms of the UFO community, but it's even more about who can get the next big story to get some traction, get that attention, keep that cycle going until they've got the next one in the hopper ready to hit the headlines. And it's a treadmill that is just going faster and faster.
Yes. And what do you think of anonymous sources? I mean,
I think the thing with anonymous sources is in things like law. I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a cop, but in things like law enforcement or things like that, we got an anonymous tip. Well, there are ways to go check what that anonymous person said. You can corroborate that evidence. It can lead you in a direction, but it isn't like you aren't going to get the indictment based on one piece of anonymous eyewitness testimony. You've got to have, that's part of your triangulation on what you're trying to find. I think sometimes ufology makes the anonymous source that's the whole story in some cases, or it corroborates it corroborates other UFO stories that have been around for years. Like Grush, the stuff he talks about, this is not new stuff. There was a crash, there were bodies, they recovered things, even the bell-shaped objects. These are not new things, and because they're being recycled, if you aren't aware of the recycling, it just sounds new.
It's not even new that it's intelligence officers.
No. No, this is the same sort of thing over and over again. And it's it's just if we say it enough times, enough people will think it's legitimate because well, a lot of people are saying X, Y, and Z. It's no, five people have said it, and they're all working together, to make you think. It's what's the term? Astroturfing. I think there's a lot of astroturfing, a lot in a lot of these things. So it's yeah, it's anonymous sources are, good, but they can't be the only thing. And I think a lot of times it's the only thing.
Well, I think, when you're dealing with a mainstream or a true journalist, I mean, they have, even though this source is anonymous, they've done their due diligence. They've checked things out, and there's obviously a very real reason why this person cannot come forward, probably for their safety or, other reasons. But when you look at the UFO community, it's like it's always, well, this anonymous source, we can't come forward, or this anonymous, person is going to give us all this information. It's like, okay, no, sorry, I'm here. My name is right there. Everybody knows everything about me. Jack's name's there. Your name is there. Like, we are putting ourselves out there, and this is what we have to do if we want people to take anything seriously. And so, to me, to see different people in the UFO community who hide behind screen names or hide behind anonymity when they're promoting specific materials, is just ludicrous.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody wants to share an opinion about something, sure, I don't need to know who you are. But if you want me to believe you, I'm going to. If you want me to believe something you're saying that will fundamentally change my view of the cosmos, you need to be more than UFO Fred or whoever. So yeah, and like journalists, you look at stories in the Washington Post or whatever, and it's like what's the phrase they use? Said somebody close to the situation who cannot speak, who cannot share their name or however they phrase that. That's never the basis for the story. That's a little bit of extra tidbit where if you took that away, it doesn't change the truth of the reporting. It just adds a little bit of flavor. Where if it turns out, well, that wasn't true, well, the fundamentals of everything are still solid. Yeah, it's yeah, it's just ridiculous sometimes.
Earlier, the two of you touched on that they should have names, and that right, when we're not even dealing with an officer that says he was working on this stuff, he's saying he knows people that were. In my work on NICAP, I didn't expect to find nearly the amount of material that I found on the board members and the officers and their contacts. And that actually made me all the more skeptical of the other stories I've heard, because I went into it thinking, well, I'll do some requests or I'll search the FBI files, but I'm not going to find anything. Well, yeah, there was a lot of stuff to find, emphasizing your point, both of you made earlier, that these people have names, they have divisions they were employed in. These divisions of these agencies have charters and what their purposes were. They have former officers that write books about being in the service with the guys that you're researching. You don't just run into a trail of no evidence. And so all of these stories that just start and end with Chase Brandon saw a box on a desk, and that's just all we really know about it. If you remember that guy, that he was another one in the long line of CIA officers that could confirm Roswell. He just didn't happen to bring any of it home with him. Yeah. There will be receipts. There will at least be trails of where these officers worked and what division of the CIA. The FBI frequently has documentation of various people throughout history that needed security clearances and things like that. And uh, we just turn a blind eye to that in the UFO genre, particularly if it doesn't suit us to not like where that trail leads.
And you can always fall back on the sort of well-worn cliche of, well, that person's records were purged in order to keep it super duper secret, so you won't
Right.
find anything on them because they were too smart to allow that out there.
Right. Yet there are foreign adversaries that are, getting access to all of the military files, from veterans that are over. Yeah. I mean, it's just like, it's insane. Yeah. I mean, give me a break. I had a friend that was in the military that was doing some pretty interesting things. And I mean, all of his colleagues, they were all, I mean, that information was stolen by an adversary. So give me a break. It's some of these excuses are so weak at best.
Yeah. Who was it? Bill English. Remember Bill
Mhm.
English back in the day, and Bill English and Bill Cooper and others probably named Bill, who just in the course of their duties saw a document outlining the entire conspiracy to hide everything, and it was just laying around, and well, why isn't there any evidence of this? And well, I don't have a copy of it with me, but I told my friend Bob about it. So if you ask Bob, Bob will tell you that in 1972, I told him about the Majesty 12 document that I saw. And never mind the fact that what I've said I saw has changed over the years. I clearly saw something. And no, you probably didn't. But it's a good story, and nobody can actually disprove it, because part of the lack of critical thinking applied sometimes is where the burden of proof actually is. I don't have to prove you wrong, UFO guy. You have to prove your claim. You
Right.
made the claim. I'm just asking you to prove your claim. And you said, well, there's no way to prove it, but you'll just have to trust me.
Okay.
It's like, I mean, I enjoy your little story. It's very amusing, but I'm not gonna. It doesn't change my life. I don't think I've ever shared this story publicly, but there was a sweet little old man at my church. He's passed away now, and he was in the Air Force back in the 1960s, and he told me that at a bar one night, one of his fellow airmen told him that he had driven parts of a flying saucer back from New Mexico to Wright-Patterson, and he didn't know if his friend was telling the truth, but he knew that he had been told that. And I'm looking at some of the stories that circulate, and I'm like, that's basically all this is. This is, I know somebody, and they told me they met with a witness who was involved in the cover-up. And it's like, no, it's just a sweet little guy who might have had somebody pulling his leg back in 1966. So it's
entire books have been written on a lot less than you got there.
Yeah. My dad was in the Navy in the early 60s, and I keep meaning to ask him. I think I've asked him about UFOs, and he's just like, no. But I usually don't get around to it, because like the actual things he did were more interesting, like working with NASA on the Gemini or Mercury orbits. And I think he was on one of the sort of AWACS planes during one of the last atmospheric H-bomb test.
Wow.
Yeah, he was like an aircraft electronics tech. And well, where's your documentation of this? He threw it out. He didn't keep any of he got like this letter from the admiral, thank you for your work on this project. Oh yeah, I threw that out. I'm like, Dad, come on, don't have you no sense of hoarding? Why don't you hoard a whole barn full of stuff that nobody wants, but that one piece of paper? But yeah, so it's hearsay, it's rumor, it's innuendo, and it gets turned into something more because, frankly, there's an audience for it.
Right.
And there is a market-driven reason that this keeps happening. This wouldn't be happening if somebody wasn't making money off it. And as somebody who is not opposed to making money, you know, good for you, but stop lying. I mean, I don't, I really worry when people take some of this stuff as seriously as they take it. And when UFO belief becomes someone's entire personality and leads them to be horrible to other people, or to stand by while other people are being horrible to people, it's very sad. And it's like the worst stereotype of a fanatical sports team supporter that you can imagine, because this isn't just about basketball or politics. This is about our place in the universe. I think with ufology, the stakes are, you can make the stakes so high that how can you not believe this hard and proselytize and evangelize this hard, because this is about something of cosmic importance. And the people who want to manipulate parts of that community know that, and they use that. And they're, in a lot of cases, it's preying on people who are very vulnerable. People who are seeking a place in the universe are people who are vulnerable sometimes, and people who are easily victimized, because we're offering you a place in this. We're offering you a spot. And you always sort of watch documentaries about cults, and how on earth do people get dragged into this stuff? And then you talk to them and you're like, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
I probably would have gotten mixed up in that too if I was in your situation. So I don't know. I wonder if the solution is, if we're all just more inclusive and loving of everybody everywhere, we won't have as many people who get dragged into the awful side of this. Not that all of ufology is awful, of course, but the awful cult-like bits of it.
Absolutely. And that's very beautifully put. And I think it is, people who are out there on the speaking circuit are promoting this love and light, and we are getting messages from these beings who are talking about like this new world that we're creating, and we have to save the environment, and we have to do A, B, C, and D. And it's like, but you guys are doing what? You're hanging out with white supremacists. You're hanging out with people who are bullying women and people that are minorities in this subject. It's like, what about this is new age, peace, love, and light?
Mm-hmm.
There isn't. And it's been kind of sad and mind-blowing to me to see something like the new age, movement. It's like, okay, we want to meditate, yoga, peace, love, and light. Those are all wonderful things. I love meditating. I love doing yoga. But it's when you have these cult-like leaders that come into the fray where things go wrong, and people who are genuine people get led astray. And the yoga community is a prime example of that. Or you look at, people like Ramtha and her cult, that was an interesting experience. And if you guys don't know about Ramtha, definitely check that out. I think we've got some FOIA requests going on about Ramtha, who conveniently enough was a person that bankrolled MUFON.
Mm-hmm.
She was, so interesting stuff.
Jay-Z Knight, was that?
Yes.
Yeah. That's fascinating stuff. And or even sort of, going back again, Heaven's Gate. This is not emblematic of ufology as a whole, but it's this topic being used as, it's the vehicle to do all this. And just it was awful. And the way I still get head up about this, the way you had people like Art Bell and Courtney Brown and Whitley Strieber, who Bell and Strieber later like, we were just sort of reporting what we heard. It's like, but you listen to those shows, and they're harder to find online than some other Art Bell shows. I remember, I had to I found the cassettes on eBay about 15 years ago.
Wow.
And bought them that way. And I digitized them, and I sort of threw them out into the ether. So they're out there somewhere, that are probably my digitizations of it. But no, it's very clear that Bell and Strieber were promoting this idea of the Hale Bopp companion. And then after everything went awful, and that they sort of throw Courtney Brown under the bus, which is a great place for him, don't get me wrong, but then they had another group that they put on in 99 or so, when there was another comet, and this group was saying that the Hale Bopp stuff, that there was a cover up about Hale Bopp, and Bell is just sort of, as usual, uncritically just promoting this, hiding behind the I'm an entertainer, while presenting himself as, somebody breaking news. It's that left a bad taste in my mouth. And also the other paranormal talk radio people who attacked Bell for it, who you just know were just really jealous they weren't the ones breaking the story. So you have this sort of infighting with that, and it's UFO world, man. It's a circus, and it's always been a bit of a circus. But it's like a darker, creepier circus.
It absolutely is. And I think that's, the Hale Bopp comet story and Art Bell and Courtney Brown. I mean, that is something that really should be put forward for other people to learn from. I'm glad that you digitize that and that's out there in the ether, because that is important. And here you've got, sorry, it wasn't really me. We just put this idea out there. The same thing can be said about Skinwalker Ranch, and the fact that you've got these hitchhikers that are following people home, causing cancer, all of these things. There are repercussions to this. This isn't a benign, fun thing, and you should have disclosures, like you're saying. Hey, this is entertainment. Don't take this at face value and think that this is real, and you're going to visit the ranch and come home with cancer, because people are, this doesn't end well. And I think that goes, the History Channel should be held accountable for promoting things. Absolutely. I think some of the other channels that are promoting things as fact should also be held accountable. And there are different things that you can look at online talking about the dangers of quote unquote reality TV. And that needs to be really studied further, and people need to understand, this, you need to enter the subject with caution.
Yes. And that there are dark things happening on these shows. Even if you're watching for entertainment, you're not getting the full story about what's going on. Someone in the comments, I just noticed, mentioned that Major Ed Dames was also very big on the Hale Bopp thing. So you can never not mention Ed Dames. Thanks for that reminder. We watched last night the Duggar family documentary on Amazon, the Shiny Happy People one. And it's a great insight into how what you see on reality TV is not real at all. And it's just, I think there's a degree of media literacy that needs to, be out there as well.
Housewives of Salt Lake isn't real?
Yeah, no, it's all so staged, and it's so
my heart's broken.
fake. It's just, and ufology is going down that same path, and it's never been great, but it's getting worse. And what a cheery topic, right?
Well, if I could jump in, please. You had mentioned Yeah, there was a point we had Bill English, Bill Cooper, Bill Moore, and these guys, I mean, they were like Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair doing promos. I mean,
Yes.
and um, we could laugh about it. I am laughing about it in hindsight. Sometimes I'll still look at Bill English throwing down at the MUFON symposium, and with everything he could muster, he was trying to act as if he was holding himself back to not physically attack someone that was calling his integrity into question. And in a manner of speaking, it's hilarious. And then in another way, as you so eloquently put a few minutes ago, there are no doubt people that trusted these men explicitly and are very hurt that now in their old age, these guys that claim to be on the lam and avoiding the CIA hit squad like to post on Facebook,
Yeah.
and it continued. And I think today I have spoken to people myself that are embarrassed that they put the confidence into the stars that they did, and Louis Elizondo and Chris Mellon and Tom DeLonge, and are embarrassed about it. And that is a best case scenario. I mean, the alternative to that is people that are still trying to rationalize and figure out why they weren't ripped off, that they just gave their money away, and why it's okay that they didn't produce the stuff they claimed they were going to produce, and why it's okay that Christopher Mellon doesn't even include TTSA in his bio anymore. And all of this rationalizing. And then there's people that just dig their heels in harder. And as both of you have aptly discussed tonight, come after people maliciously that so much as question, like the things I just said are just sacrilege. And so in that manner of speaking, being emotionally hurt, embarrassed, and just not wanting to talk about UFOs anymore is a best case scenario for the people that were drawn in and thought, wow, this time it's really for real. I know it's been silly before, but this time it's really for real. And it wasn't again.
Yeah. And I would be surprised if a lot of the people who came in during the big Tom DeLonge TTSA wave, the UFO Twitter wave, I don't know how many of those people are going to be sort of the long timer, old head UFO guys in 20 years. I think there's so much churn, not just in UFO stuff, but just in general, that that sort of longevity isn't going to be there. And you're going to have a lot of people who don't make a big production of it. They just are like, well, I've been fooled 3 times now. I'm just going to be interested in something else. But yeah, it's just the sort of knee jerk, you're just a debunker attitude, which has always been there. But I think our discourse these days makes it more vicious instead of, there's no just, well, ignore the debunkers, don't pay them attention. No, you've got to go out and attack people who are actively, questioning the narrative.
Rite of passage.
Well, thank you, but no. I passed my rite of, whatever. But I do think the one sad but good thing is that the fact that this group of people has been harassing the people from NASA, because that right there, these are the same, like I mentioned, the same group of people that have been harassing a lot of us. And I think that is good that there are other eyes on that. And hopefully at the end of the day, people that actually care about the subject and want disclosure or whatever that is, want to investigate this topic, hopefully that will discourage them from joining up with Lou Elizondo and his minions, because this obviously their agenda is not about actually finding the truth. So
Yeah.
we will see.
Yeah.
But I've got to just ask you, because you've got a turntable to your
Yeah,
right.
I do. Where is it? It's back there. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me about the turntable, and then we'll go to your guitars.
Okay, so their turntable, I think it was largely a COVID collecting thing that I got into. Was like, okay, I'm going to track down every Jethro Tull album on vinyl. It sort of went from there a little bit, and I don't listen to it as much as I should because it's all on my computer, right? So, but yeah, and the guitars and mandolins and there's a mandola back there. I play with them. I make sounds with them, but you couldn't call it music. But it's fun. It's fun to mess around with. Yeah, this is my sort of basement of earthly delights here.
Oh my gosh, it's I was watching an interview with you, and I'm like, the turntable. Look at all of this stuff. And I messaged Jack, and I'm like, okay, he's a friend for life right there. That is just so freaking cool.
My wife was very happy we got the basement redone, so all of my stuff could be down here and not sort of the rest of the house looks very, very tidy and normal. But down here is it's the UFO stuff and the vintage Transformers and the record albums. So.
That is so cool. And so, like, when did you start playing the guitar? Or
gosh, in college, I started messing around with that stuff, and then just enjoyed messing around with audio stuff. And honestly, that's kind of what the sort of beginning of the podcast was, an excuse to buy audio equipment and to learn about that stuff and mess around a little bit. And the podcast sort of took off nicely. And so I feel compelled to keep doing it because people are still listening. So
that is so cool. And so I just have to ask you, like, have you ever heard of David Lindley?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Because I just think of the mandolin and I think of David Lindley, and I just found an old poster from Laguna Seca that I got when I was down there, and I stole off a telephone pole, like with the Grateful Dead. David Lindley was playing with the Grateful Dead, and I love me some David Lindley. So
yeah, I think he played on several Warren Zevon albums.
Yeah. Yep.
And so that's sort of where I first heard about him.
Didn't he do Werewolf in London with Warren Zevon? Maybe
I think he played on that. He played on I think so. Yeah, okay. And a lot of stuff on that first the first album, which is kind of the second. I'm not going to get into the Warren Zevon discography issues, but yeah, David Lindley was amazing. I think yeah. He was on Werewolves of London. So great guitarist. He really was.
Yeah, that's so cool. So anyway, thank you for letting me nerd out on your
no problem.
musical stuff, because I'm like sitting here in my studio with Pilates equipment, and I've got my Hammond organ over there, and
nice.
a bunch of percussion instruments, and I had to give my drum kit away, which I was very sad about, but I'm sure my neighbors are very happy about. But music is something that's close to Jack's heart and my heart, and yeah, so it's cool to see that connection.
My godson, who's just turned 8, wanted a washboard, a musical washboard for his birthday, because he saw some band on YouTube playing a watch. So I got him a washboard and a harmonica. So I'm sure his parents are thrilled.
Nice.
With, the 8-year-old with the washboard. So
that is so cool though. That's such a fun. It's like the multi-guero. I've got all of these. When I was in a band called Zion Tribe, it was kind of a Latin, kind of a reggae fusion of things. And I would play different percussion instruments and was the singer and stuff, but that was just so much fun for a long time. So that's cool. Yeah. Maybe I need to get a washboard.
They're great. They're on Amazon.
Well, save the queen.
Yeah.
But thank you so much. This
was fun.
Yeah, very good interview, and I recommend, because I'm totally digging the Saucer Life. So please, everybody, go out and listen to that. The Gulf Breeze 6. I mean, that in and of itself, that whole story is incredible. And you've done things on UFO Magazine, which I found fascinating, as well as I sit here with all of my magazines and periodicals and things. So it's your show is worth listening to for anyone getting into this subject and wanting to learn more.
Well,
Yeah, we can't overemphasize the quality work that Aaron does on Saucer Life.
thank you.
Yeah, thanks,
Very
you
kind.
guys.
Very kind.
Absolutely. And hopefully we will have you back. And I want
Yes.
to, yeah, that'll
Anytime.
be fun.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely. So I will just say thank you to the audience. Thank you for your wonderful questions. You guys are always very, very respectful, and I appreciate that. This is probably the most respectful chat that I know of, and so good for you guys. I want to thank all of my Patreons. I want to thank the people that supports expandingfrontiersresearch.org. Jack just did a drop today. Jack, will you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. We recently received some more records from the FBI on Ira Einhorn, who is dubbed the Unicorn Killer because Einhorn in German roughly translates to unicorn. And he was a 1970s counterculturist, dude in the UFO world. He was big and an environmental activist, well known, and was accused of brutally murdering his girlfriend and convicted of it. And he shows up in Jacques Vallée's writings and a number of places that he can be tracked through history, a la Saucer Life, the way that Saucer Life tracks things. And we got almost 400 pages of records a while back that had already been released, but it was the FBI standard release. And they'll inform you of that in a FOIA request. They'll tell you to give you a quick response. Here's what we've released on that in the past. And then if you want, I actually learned this from John Greenwald helpfully.
And I just have to say, sorry, like Aaron, if you want to go, I'm sorry.
Oh no, this is fine.
Are you good? Are you good hanging out?
I'm fine.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Sweet. Okay.
Yeah, I'll be brief, I promise. But then you can quickly turn around and say, well, give us everything that you didn't include in that. Like you do the same FOIA request again for everything you didn't just give us. And that it took about a year, but they did then send us another 33 records. They say there were 47 pages reviewed and they withheld in full 14 pages. So we're going to appeal that. But yeah, you can go to our blog at expandingfrontiersresearch.org, click on the blog, and it's the latest post there. You can download all the records we've received on the now deceased, he died in prison, Ira Einhorn.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think he's, again, a very interesting person who has been, a quoted or not quoted, but he's been a part. If you look at Jacques Vallée's diaries, you can see multiple references to him over the years. And he was the co-founder of Earth Day, which is always interesting. And again, he was, like you mentioned, Jack, he was convicted of killing his girlfriend, stuffing her in a piece of luggage, and then he fled. And it was very interesting. After he was in a foreign country, he also was interviewed by people in the UFO field, which I find, as a person who has endured domestic violence, I find actually at this point pretty deeply offensive that anyone would want to interview somebody who killed his girlfriend. That's all I'm saying. So
he did flee, and that is a big part of the story. The woman, Holly Maddox, was reported missing in the late 70s, and the police searched his home about a year and a half after she was missing and found her in the Foot Locker in his closet in an apartment in Philadelphia. And then in 1981, he failed to appear for a court date and was not located then until 1997 in France. And there was about a 4-year period then that he fought extradition. And yeah, that's when he was interviewed by some Americans, was in contact with some Americans. Part of his spiel was that he had been set up, and prior to the murder, he had a following like the people we've been talking about tonight. And so he had an audience wanting to believe that the CIA had set him up, because I could probably get y'all to say it in unison. He knew too much. And no, it's not funny, but I don't know what to do anymore but just laugh. But as I wrote in our article, the FBI and Philadelphia law enforcement agencies and a jury disagreed and convicted him. And after serving about 18 years, he died in 2020 in a Pennsylvania prison.
Well, interesting story. And again, interesting intersection with people in the UFO world who I've tried to forget that they were associated with him, but there is a record. So it's fascinating. But anyway, thank you. And thanks for doing the FOIA requests. So this will be interesting to see.
I enjoy it. Yeah.
To see where this goes. And we've also got a lot of different FOIA requests we've been putting out there with regard to things that I think are going to be very substantive pretty quickly. So thanks for your work, Jack. I know that was a little tease. That was clearly I need to work on my acting skills. Dun, dun, dun. Anyway, I don't know, guys. So thank you very much. I will let you go, and thanks for hanging out a little bit after the showtime. But
Thank you.
But yeah. And thanks, Jack. And thank you, everybody. Hit the like and subscribe, and make sure that you share information. Thank you, Peter, for sharing that. And I miss Mario tonight, but I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend, and I will catch you next week. So take care, you guys. Oh, and you can go to, I want to just say again, saucerlife.com to check out your podcast. And then next week when I get your book, I will look at it and then talk to the audience a little bit about some of the great discoveries and then have you on again. So
excellent. Wonderful. Absolutely.
Okay. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.